Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to My Way, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and it is a lovely Tuesday evening, June the 6th, 2023. I'm so excited to have someone back on the show this evening who has been on One, who has been with his beautiful wife on Breakthroughs Around the World series. And I'm super excited that he's here for our My Way show this evening because I really feel like what he does fits so well into the themes of this show. Our guest has been dubbed a soul whisperer and is recognized for helping people break free from the mental prisons of negative inner dialogue and self-sabotage that keep them drained of passion and dissatisfied with life. And we know we've learned from 2 seasons of this show that carries over big time into our businesses. So without further ado, let's welcome Stuart Elliott to the show. Welcome, Stuart. I'm so glad to have you back on the Breakthrough Show Network this evening.
Yeah, well, it's always wonderful to talk to you, and obviously we're going live, so talking to your audience as well. You know, it's a very special moment in my life. So thank you very much for inviting me.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different vibe doing a live show as opposed to a recorded show. For the longest time I had to talk about negative inner dialogue. I told myself, like, what if someone comes to the door? What if something happens to the kids? What if like the world comes to an end and I'm live on air? What do I do then? And I had myself convinced that I couldn't do it. So how should I have been talking to myself, Stuart?
Well, I mean, you know, if you take that last one, if the world comes to an end, what a wonderful way to go out, to be the person talking to everybody. So that's a beautiful thing to be a position to be. And, you know, if someone comes to the door, someone comes to the door. I mean, if you've got a guest on, say, look, you know, you just carry on talking about whatever, and I'll just go and answer the doorbell.
Yeah.
You know, that's all you can do. So, I mean, but, you know, it is that mental prison that we construct. And, you know, I always talk to people and tell them about this flies in the jar experiment that was done by some scientists a few years ago. And I think, well, a few years, maybe in the 50s or 60s or something, but they put some common houseflies in a glass jar, fed some sugar and some water in there and put a glass lid on it, and left them there for a few days. And after a few days, they took the lid off, and not a single fly tried to get out.
Really?
Yeah, because that was their world. They'd come to accept that this is their world, and this is where a lot of us are. And that glass jar that we live in has quite often been created for us by other people. And we don't see that until much later sometimes. And I'll give you a good example of this. I was flying from where I lived at the time in mainland China, Fuzhou, into Hong Kong to do some things there. And the lady next to me, mid-30s or so, we got talking. She's a Hong Kong national who'd just been in Fuzhou on a business trip, and she didn't like her job. She's a financial advisor, accountant, or whatever. And I said, okay, well, you know, what is it you would like to do? And she's got this dream of opening a soap manufacturing business. And that would mean that she'd have to leave her work and go to Taiwan to study the whole business of soap manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. But not one of her friends, not one of her family supported her. And she felt like she was pressured and living in this world. Nobody cared about her and her dreams and her happiness. They were all focused on themselves. Her family were thinking, okay, if you leave this job, there's not a steady income, possibly our retirement's not going to be looked after. Her friends were probably saying to themselves, if you change, we have to change. And we're not ready to change. And that's one of the big challenges of being an entrepreneur. You know, you're not fitting into that normal mode. So you're challenging everybody around you to start rethinking. And unconsciously, they're not ready for that. So they put pressure on you in so many subtle ways. And you end up without this support structure, and you're that fly in the jar. You feel trapped, but you're not satisfied.
Right.
So it is a challenge. And, you know, the best thing we can do is, with family, it's not always possible to distance ourselves but we have to find a way to mitigate that negativity that's being pushed on us. And sometimes we have to, say to the friends, it's time to move on. For me to find a new set of friends who actually appreciate where I want to go and don't load me with this negativity.
Right. Right. Are you also a psychic, Stuart? Because I'm just saying that the timing of what you're talking about is unbelievable. And I know that Brittany is out in the audience laughing her head off right now because her and I have had these conversations this week. Also, she did mention to me behind the scenes, she's like, I could watch Stuart's episodes over and over just for his voice. And I said, I think that must be like a prerequisite because you do hypnosis as well. Is that correct?
I do hypnosis. I do, use mindfulness. I use NLP. I use my life experiences. I mean, I've had a lot of beautiful experiences, but I don't know whether I'm a psychic. I have a very good sense of intuition. It could be that you're the psychic who said, okay, I've got to put Stuart on today because I need to talk to him.
That could have been it. It was a, what do you call it? When, seeing it ahead of time, I knew that something was going to happen today and I needed Stuart on the show today. Mm-hmm. I want you to take a moment though, and take everybody back and tell everybody how you got into the work that you do, because I don't even think we really touched on that when you came onto the Breakthrough Show. So give everybody just a little bit of a background of how you got to be the soul whisperer.
Well, it started with me everything started obviously in, a long time ago at birth, but, my life has been a journey and it took me through Africa. It took me back to Africa when I'd done an overland trip. And then after 18 years, things fell apart as they were in Africa. So I was offered an opportunity to come to China to teach English as a second language. And what I found was that for some reason, everybody liked me. And maybe it's because I was focusing on having fun. And this is a big thing, I think, in life that you need to have, is that fun aspect. And I'd go into the classroom and I would have fun with the kids. And because I was having fun, everybody outside of that looked at the classes and thought, there's something wrong. He's not teaching, they're playing. And there was one particular primary school that I worked at, and parents were complaining, other class teachers were complaining about the noise and the games in the class. But when it came to the end of the term, when it was time for the exams, and they got the highest marks in English ever, there was a quick change. So, it is that going outside the box and focusing on there that I've had that ability to do. And, I'd studied hypnosis, I studied that, but they're just tools. The key is to have that conversation with somebody and not talk to them, talk with them and actually listen. And I always say to people, how do you listen? And majority of people say, with your ears, and they look at me as I'm strange. And I said, well, how about listening with your whole body? Not just your ears, use your eyes, use your energy receptors, right, and just feel and connect to the person. And that's where magic happens, because so many people are not heard. And they go through life feeling, there's something wrong because no one's actually listening to them at a deep, deep level. And I suppose that is part of that soul whispering aspect. But I didn't recognize it. Somebody else recognized it. He told me, you are a soul whisperer. And since then, quite a few people have said to me, you're talking to my soul. But going back, what happened was, as I moved to different schools, how can I say it? I found that I was in a situation where I was working with more older students, 20, 25 upwards, and they were either getting ready to move to the States or emigrate to somewhere or study overseas. And then there were some business people doing business. And because the class size became smaller and the people became older and more mature, they were able to talk about problems. And it was a natural transition to have coaching sessions instead of classes. We were learning how to communicate in English because that was the challenge, but they became coaching sessions and people started making that big smile, that connection from the heart when they suddenly saw answers that they'd never considered before. And that said to me, Stuart, this is what you're supposed to be doing. But everything up until then was my training. It was my university degree or bachelor's degree or whatever. It was, that opportunity to find out and connect. And that is something that sometimes takes a little while for us to recognize what it is we're supposed to be doing. I mean, talking to school, at 14, 15, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Who knows? Most people don't.
I don't think most of us do.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do something with electricity. That was my thing at the time, but that was all I could tell you. You've got no. I mean, what is the rest of your life at that age? 20 is a long way away. Never mind 30, 40, 50, 60 or whatever. So it's a big question at that age. And I think it's too young to really be able to answer it. But you've got to have a direction, otherwise you go nowhere. So it's good to have a direction. But, don't fall into the trap of saying, this is the only thing. Because you go on that journey and all sorts of opportunities open up. And if we're open to them, who knows what can happen.
What you just said was so important, Stuart, because I don't think I was ever taught as a child or adolescent or even going into young adulthood that I could pick something to do, go that path, go that direction, and that it would be okay if I switched directions, if I didn't like it, if it didn't work out. I was never taught that. And so I've found myself in exactly the place that you're talking about right now, Stuart, of feeling stuck because I not giving myself almost the permission to pivot or to go a different direction.
Yeah, and again, no one's taught you that you have that permission, that you have that choice, because this is the way it is. And there's a lot of people who are outwardly very, very successful. It could be a CEO or very high level in a company, and they're living this world with all the the pressure, the wealth, and everything else that comes there. But they are not satisfied inside because it's not their life, it's not their dream, and they've never been able to find it.
Right.
Because it's we're living that life of our parents or society or whatever, and we're supposed to be happy because of that outward success, but it's not making us happy because it's not aligned with our soul message. And how do we find it? That's the question.
Yeah,
because we're not taught.
right.
And that is a challenge. But we have to remember that the education system isn't designed to make us fulfilled. It's designed to fit us into a hole, a peg, or a box in society to make society function.
Right.
So it takes a little time sometimes. And I think the best advice I can give someone is that make a choice, make a destination. But that's only the guide way. And go on that journey and then open yourself up to what happens. And that destination, it's, let's say you're in the States and you live in California, you decide to go to New York. There's a big journey if you go by road, or if you walk, there's an even bigger journey. But if you're going on it, you see things that you wouldn't have seen if you hadn't have gone towards New York. If you'd have gone down towards Mexico, you'd see different things. Right. So those are the things which you will open doorways in your life. And at some stage, you may say, okay, well, New York's no longer interesting to me. I'm happier here. Let me find out more about that. And that part of advice is missing.
Yeah.
Because everyone's focused on their lives and making you fit into their lives in the way that they think you should, rather than thinking, okay, what's best for him, or what's best for Jessica, or what's best for whoever. And that's a shame.
Absolutely. And that's so much of what we talk about on this show, is that there is a lot of that outside chatter, and it can be hard to, when you've got all of that going on outside of you, to tune in to what does Stuart really want? What does Jessica really want in this situation? I do want to say hi really quickly to Ellen that's joining us out in the audience this morning. It's good to see you. And I would love for anybody that's watching or listening to tune in and say, hey, let us know where you're joining from. And if there's any questions that you have for Stuart as we engage in this conversation this evening. You talked about in the work that you do, a negative inner dialogue, but you also mentioned earlier about our need as humans to be heard. and listen to. And it's interesting because as I have found myself struggling to feel heard and listened to, that's when I notice that negative inner dialogue gets louder. And so as we're, as we're talking to entrepreneurs this evening, as we're starting out in our business, we've got that outside chatter. We feel like no one's listening to us. And now that inner, dialogue kicks up of like, am I worthy? Anybody listening to me? I'm on the wrong path. And it's not a good situation that we can find ourselves in sometimes. Sometimes it can be hard for people to, how do we sort of balance that of feeling like, we want to be heard, so that feeling heard, so outside people listening matters, but also that inner dialogue is kicking up too. Like it's I feel like there's a harmony or something that needs to happen there. How do we sort of balance that, Stuart?
Yeah, I think the entrepreneurial journey is interesting, that most people go it alone, and then they have to shut themselves away from those around them because the people around them don't understand.
Right.
Why don't you get a regular job? You can't do this, you can't do that type of thing. So I think that for an entrepreneur, you've got to go out of your way to find a good support network of people who understand your journey. It doesn't mean abandon everybody else, but you've got to find that space where you can have these conversations and talk through how you're feeling, because you need somebody who understands that. And it could be that you need a special friend for this journey, or a special friend for that part. And then you have, should we say, different levels of friends for the different needs that you have as a human being. But to go it on its own, it's crazy.
Right.
But it's not easy to recognize that, because that is not part of the entrepreneurial journey in most people's mind. And they are then fighting to get this business moving, but at the same time, they're fighting to counter the negativity that's being pushed on them by other people. So it's a double-edged sword in that way. But if you have that understanding, then you go out of your way at the beginning to find people who are on the same journey as you. And that could just be going to a networking event and finding similar people and making friends with them. And then you've got someone to call and just have that conversation with.
I love that. When you've struggled in your business, Stuart, when you felt like you're not being heard, who is someone that you feel like you've been able to go to, or someone you've been able to look up to along your personal journey?
I think there's two levels there. There's, number one is a mentor that you can have in mind, but you don't know them as a person, but they're there to guide you. So, one of the people who's been very important in my life is Jim Rohn, and he was a phenomenally wise person. He's passed away to the next stage of his life now, but his legacy is behind him, and he's always in that mind. A lot of other people, they use Napoleon Hill in that way. So there's always something there, somebody there you can connect to. And if you go into, sort of say, meditations or self-hypnosis or whatever, you can have imaginary meetings with those people as your inner guides. So that is a great thing. And there, but there's also some friends that you meet. I mean, for instance, Ellen Janes just came on here. She's a really good friend of mine. We met 12 years ago in Amsterdam on a training course. She lives in New York, and she's a good reason to go to New York, because she's a beautiful person. We have some wonderfully deep conversations, and she understands me, and I understand her. So having somebody like that you can pick up the phone and talk to is something very, very special. And we need to identify those people, or go out of our way to find those people in our life. And it's, as I say, maybe a networking event or something else you just go to, and you're looking unconsciously for this type of person, and that's what you need. And then you can build that rapport. But also you've got the people you can carry around in your head, like Jim Rohn. He's one of his sayings is always in my head, and it's success is that thing you attract through the person you become. That stuck with me for some reason. And that we've all got these little sayings, and if we see that, then it's a fallback. It's okay. I've got to change. I've got to do this type of thing, and we don't feel so lonely then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a choice, right? That our entrepreneurial journey can be what we make of it. And that's such a goal of mine with this show, is to remind people that you can form it. It's like a just a ball of clay that someone sits in front of you. You can form it in whatever way you want it to look like. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's, and it doesn't have to be lonely. You can invite somebody over to play in the clay with you, and have that conversation. Brittany was singing "You've Got a Friend in Me" out in the audience. And Ellen said Stuart is my brother. I love that. So I want to ask you a question that sort of ties into what we've been talking about, because you also mentioned earlier on, I can't remember in what context you were talking about, but you were saying something about when things go on and also when things have to come to an end. And it's perfect timing right now, because I asked a question on my Facebook page yesterday. I asked, how do you know when something has run its course, or when it's time to either give up, redirect, or start fresh? And I would love to pose that question to you, because you mentioned you being very intuitive for yourself, but also, like, is there a feeling you get? How do you know when something is done and it's just time to redirect in your business, or quit, or however you want to form it?
I would suggest that feeling or that understanding is different for everybody, but there's some way that you know about it.
Yeah.
And then what happens is then, the safety mode kicks in, the flies in the jar mode kicks in, because, if I go outside of this world, what is there? If I leave this behind, what is there? And we become attached to things sometimes because it's that comfort zone we've created. But I think one thing is to, if you have that feeling, and ask yourself, how is this serving me? What else could serve me better? And then we need that support network to help us sometimes find that courage to leave it behind. Not to say, okay, this is the thing you should do, but say, give you options and things like that, or help you there. But just say, look, I am here for you. For instance, there's a beautiful story from Milton H. Erickson, who's a phenomenal hypnotherapist. He had a lady who phoned him and said, look, I've got this problem. I want you to be my therapist, but I can't see you because I can't talk to anybody about this problem. So I'm going to drive to your house and park on your driveway about 11 o'clock at night. And I'll sit there in the car. I won't come and disturb you. I'll sit there in the car and I'll work through the problem. And she did this several times. And then she phoned him and said, look, the problem's gone. Thank you so much. How much do I owe you? Type of thing. He never saw her. He never spoke to her. But the fact that he was there and she knew he was there, it allowed her, gave her that courage and understanding to be able to do what she needed to do internally to fix the problem. So having that friend that that you can call on, someone who understands the journey you're on, where you are. Right. You don't necessarily have to call them, but they're there. Okay, he's got my back. And I've heard some stories before where two close friends, they one of them had a death in the family, very close family member or something like that. And they just sat down next to each other and said nothing. And then 20 or 30 years later, this person says to the other person, I'm so glad you were there for me at that time. I wouldn't have got through it without you. So that physical presence, just that knowledge, that understanding can be the most beautiful thing in the world.
Sometimes that's all it takes, is just that presence, that availability, that knowing that someone is there. I had commented on that post because someone had commented that, sometimes it takes an outside person to be able to tell you, hey, it's time to redirect, or it's time to switch path. And I said, I've done really well over the years of surrounding myself with people whose answer is always, don't give up. And I realized, though, that in that, sometimes not giving up just means continuing to move forward, whatever that looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean, don't give up on that one specific thing. Don't give up on you and your purpose and that movement forward. And so that really hit me as I was thinking about that afterwards, because when he said that, I thought, well, everybody around me always says, don't give up, Jessica. And so I'm grateful for that. But I also realized that in that comes my choice then of going, okay, which path do I want to go down? I'm not giving up. I'm still moving forward, but which path?
Yeah, and that's important, is that recognition that you have that choice. But the choice can only really come through accepting where you are at this moment.
Yeah.
And, and we spoke about that a little bit earlier, that, you've got to accept, you've got to just, okay, this is what's happening. And no judgment, nothing else. And this is why sometimes family and everyone else and, our regular friendships are not the best people to be close to at that time, because they don't understand. But you accept, okay, it's happening. And then what is the way I want to go from here? And sometimes you need that inner guide like Napoleon Hill or whoever. And sometimes you need an external person, or sometimes you just need to know that there's someone there. And you say, okay, well, what would he do if he was in that situation? And that's enough for you to put the pieces together and feel supported.
Right. It's amazing the kind of relationships that we make in the entrepreneur space. Do you find, because this is something that I've found with me, that sometimes you have that overlap with relationships as an entrepreneur, a little bit different than we have, I think, when I've worked for other people or worked at an outside like brick and mortar type place? Happen of where you're maybe you work together and then you become friends, and then the lines sort of blur, or you're friends and then you start working together. Do you see that in your life as well?
I think with being an entrepreneur, there's more of a conscious choice about who you have as friends, rather than in a company or an outside employment situation where you're dropped in, and then whatever relationships are built there. Because what happens, if you become less palatable in that outside employment, is that the people who you thought were friends, they will look to their own survival and they will start rejecting you as well. And that can be a very, very hard journey. I can remember this, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he had this friend from his business days, and they used to have family meals together at least once, twice a week, and they had a really close relationship. And then something happened and he was made redundant, and that friendship died at the same time. Just like that, for no reason, because it wasn't a conscious friendship, if you like. Whereas if you find the people who are supporting you as an entrepreneur, it's a different type of relationship. And they're there for you thick and thin, because their survival is not threatened. Their survival in that situation isn't threatened if they stay next to you.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And I hadn't ever really thought about that, because I asked myself that one time, why are relationships that I'm making, even outside of, like I said, that business aspect, why are they so different as an entrepreneur now for me than they were back when I wasn't? And there really is such a huge difference. And I had never heard that before. And I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I want to take a really quick break, and then I want to come back and talk about direction in our lives, because I think there is in our business, especially as an entrepreneur, 9 million, probably more directions that we can go. And some of us get stuck because of how many choices they are. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back after this and talk about that with Stuart. Hang tight, everybody.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them, to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home, where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life, and go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Welcome back to My Way, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas. It is a beautiful Tuesday, June the 6th, 2023, and I'm here with Stuart Elliott this evening, the Soul Whisperer, which just has such a nice ring to it. We need to like frame that.
Yeah, and for me, it's Wednesday morning, so we're expanding two time zones or several time zones.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's a different time. I'm so talk about being a fly in a jar. I think I forget a lot of times, that we're just not just sitting right next to each other having this conversation.
Well, but this is so beautiful that we can have these conversations from different parts of the world, and it's morning for me, it's evening for you, or afternoon for you, and it could be midday for somebody else. It can be anything. It's just so beautiful that we're able to have this conversation, and it shows us that we are one. The whole world is one, that we're able to do that, and that's obviously the name of one of your other shows. So it's it fits in nicely.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. I talked about before we went on break the fact that there are so many decisions and so many paths and so many directions we can go as an entrepreneur. And I know that I can tend to be pretty indecisive. And I think some of that does go back to what we talked about before we've talked about trusting your decisions, and also giving ourselves that permission to pivot a little bit. But I think we get stuck in that a lot. So what have you done in your business, the moments where you felt do you feel like you're a good decision maker? Like you're just like, this is what I'm doing and I'm going.
Yeah, sometimes I do make too many decisions and go in different directions, because I'm one of these people who is excited to start things, but I don't always take them to fruition. And this is one of the character traits that I have as a person. So I have to recognize that and be aware of it. And, maybe at some stage I need to bring on somebody who can take over those things. And then continue them to fruition, because there are some people who are better at finishing things, but they're not very good at starting things. Right. But if you give them an idea, they can run with it. So we've got to look at our own strengths and find out who we are and what are our key things. Right. But I think another thing about that paralysis of analysis type of situation is that we judge ourselves. And we look back with judgment. And there's no wrong decision, because whatever decision you take at that moment takes you down a road. When you get to the end of that road and you look back, you're not the same person who made the decision, because you've had different adventures. So don't judge yourself in that way and say, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done this. The thing to do is, okay, I'm here now, I took that decision. How I can learn from that decision. And, one of the big challenges, obviously, of being an entrepreneur is we've got so many different pieces to fit together.
Right.
And what is nice now is that there are more platforms coming with all the bits and pieces built in. So they take care of that for you. You don't have to take this email marketing system, this calendar system, this thing, and try and fit them all together, because that takes up energy. What is it you are good at as an individual? Where is your key strength? Where's your key focus? Find a way to spend most of your day in that and have the other stuff done by somebody else. And that's not always the easiest at the beginning, but it's got to be a conscious decision, I think, to work towards and see how you can make it happen. And again, with that friend, with that mentor, talk to them about these things and feelings. And then you get to understand, okay, there are no wrong decisions. Every decision is the right one at that time. Because it's allowing you to grow, and recognize it and being grateful for that opportunity to grow is very important.
Right. I agree 100%. And I really, I think back to, the things, how different things are even now compared to when I started my first show back in or my first official show back in 2018. And even as I think about, I was laughing as you were telling this story about technology, because I was so determined, like, to just stick with things because that's what I had known, and that's what I had done for the longest time. But the program that we were using back in the beginning was so clunky, and it was so difficult to use, and all of these pretty things that I have on the screen here, back then, all of that had to be done manually. Like there was a lot of work that went into it. So that was the first thing. As soon as the technology that we're using now came along, I said, I'm in. I'm in. No questions asked, because there was so much that was going on behind the scenes. I think another thing that holds people up when it comes to making decisions and really moving forward in their business, and it's something that you talk about often, which is having passion for what you're doing and having kind of that fire, feeling that fire for what you have going on. And there are times when I'm very similar to you, where I have all the ideas. If you ever need an idea for anything, Stuart, I'm your girl, because I have all of the ideas. But sometimes that follow through doesn't necessarily happen.
Well, that's the thing. That's the challenge, isn't it? And what we've got to do, because I think what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they have that passion, but that's only a part. And they lose the passion because they're spending all their time on the other bits of the business, the clunky systems, etc., etc. And at the end of the day, there's a result, but it's taking so much energy away from that passion. And that is the challenge. And sometimes we build a comfort zone around that, because we get locked in that jar and we don't see outside of it. So we've got to be open to these things, and we've got to look and say, really look inside. What is it I love doing? What is it, I'm so good at? And then once we've recognized that, say, well, is what I'm doing, feeding that energy, or is it keeping me away from that energy? And if it's keeping you away, how you can, not how can I, because that's a doubt, how you can work in a different situation. And who is there out there? Because there's lots of people in South Africa, in the Philippines, around the world, in the States, who are there to help you. We've just got to identify them and find the way to allow them in and start building that trust. So you're free, because that's the whole point of being an entrepreneur, isn't it? To be free. And yet we lock ourselves in a bigger prison than we would if we were in a company.
Right. I wrote in the comments what you said, because it was so good, and I wanted to make sure, mental note, not how can I, but how you can. And I'm going to put that on a pillow, a t-shirt, something, all of that, to perhaps a tattoo to remember.
It's so true. And, I was talking to a gentleman a couple of weeks ago. He's a 3D modeler for homes and building projects, for housing projects and things like that. And he was, he lives in Panama at the moment, and it was so beautiful talking to him. And that he was looking out the balcony across the harbor in Panama, and he saw all these yachts. And he was talking about thinking, how he can, getting into, designing the interiors of the yachts for the rich people. So, I said to him, well, the yachts aren't the only toys these people have. Many of them have got many homes around the world. Many of them have got a family who they build homes for. So, just look at those yachts and connect the dots. And now he's got this little saying to himself, yachts and dots, and he could see a much bigger picture than he was allowed himself to see. So we need that vision. And then once we've got that, then we can find the ways. And some of it is to find, okay, I need to go here. Who is it who can help me get there? Who's the person? Who are the people I need to connect with or network with? And then you find that networking group and find like-minded people. And then you've got people who are at that level. I mean, if you stay, if you're a postman, just for instance, and I'm not knocking postmen, but if you stay networking with postmen, you never rise above that level. Right. But if you want to be the manager of all the postmen, you've got to start networking with the managers. You've got to move up that level out of where you are and network with the people at the next level, and then keep building, because that will help you to grow. The other way is stagnation. So we've got to be conscious of that and make these decisions and find the places where the people who are going to, encourage you to grow, meet with those people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been such a journey for so many people I know, is kind of cultivating what they want their circle to look like. And I think sometimes it can be challenging because we know that we need to surround ourselves with people that, are at that next level, that are at the place we want to be. But sometimes those people that are at that place that we want to be, they no longer want to have those relationships with the little people, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
But here's an interesting thing. I think it was Napoleon Hill, one of his Think and Grow Rich book, but he used to have a virtual mastermind with a select group of people. He would call in every night before going to bed. He would spend an hour, and he'd go into a meditation or a self hypnosis session. But he'd have this virtual mastermind, and he'd pick people who were dead, Benjamin Franklin or someone like that, and other people he respected. And what he would say is, I want this from you. Right. This is what I respect most about you. And then he'd invite each one in and have a conversation in his own mind every night. And that helped him to grow, because he was able to have that interaction of the best parts of those people that he needed. So sometimes we don't need to have the physical people. We can do that growth or start that growth in our mind in a meditation, and then we've already elevated ourselves to the next level. So when we go and talk to the people, we're no longer the little person. And we've got a great lot of visual aid these days with Facebook and all the other social media and TV. Who are these people that we want to identify? What are their mannerisms? How do they dress? How do they talk? Let's study them in that way so that we can move up out of our gangster mode, or whatever you want to call it, and be more acceptable in the circles we want to move into, because there are airs and graces, there are mannerisms, there are things that we have to understand to be more accepted or be rejected. For instance, there was a teacher, and he was 22 years old, and he was in China from the States, and he went to Hong Kong for I think it was a visa run or something like that. But he went and left in the same day, and when he came back, and he's dressed with his hoodie on and his, what I call them trousers or jeans or whatever you call them, pants, but they were hanging down his bum, and his waistband of his underpants was showing, and he's got a beard, he looks scruffy, he's got no luggage with him. He got stopped and detained at immigration for 5 hours because he didn't fit into the vision that this person had of a respectable person. And for instance, if you're walking down the street in New York, and I come up to you and I'm dressed like one of these people, and I say to you, pick up that rubbish, you're probably going to give me a dirty look and a few choice words. If I've got a really big, smart business suit on, and I say, would you mind picking up that rubbish? You're going to take a whole different thing.
Right.
So we've got to look at the circles we want to move up into and find the way that we can fit in. And there's this thing that people have. People should understand me for who I am. Let's get real. They don't. People judge by appearances first, and if we understand that, then we can move into that world. And it is a world sometimes of deception, because confidence tricksters know this to a T.
Right.
They understand it. They know how to fit into the different levels to get their way. But it's not about us manipulating. It's about us finding a way to be heard,
Right.
and start building those relationships with the people who we need to have the relationships with.
Right. We've had this really long conversation, 4 weeks to be exact, on one of my other shows, Beyond 2D, where we talked about communication and the fact that we really, as humans, have big communication issues between not just the speaking, but the listening aspects of that. And I think if we can just humble ourselves for a minute and understand, if our goal is to be heard, then there has to be something that we need to do to kind of meet people where they are, to have our voices heard. Like, I think we're in a society now where everybody's like, just be who you are no matter what. And I think the challenge with that is, like, that's not necessarily a great way to get people to listen, because you're not meeting in the middle at all. You're just going, take me as I am, period, end of story. And there's no communication. There's no effort from both parties, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, to be heard. And we've got to ask ourselves this question: how does the other person need to hear the message I've got?
Right.
And there was a wonderful example of that. I can't remember who it was now, but it was a very, very successful business person, and he's got a lot of money and everything else. And he wanted to invest more in a business, and he wanted to get the bank on board. So he went to the bank in a Florida shirt, the old, the whole Hawaiian shirt type thing and everything else. And they wouldn't take him seriously. He's a millionaire. His accounts got him. They wouldn't take him seriously because of it. They couldn't get past what they saw, the address. Now, he went back another time in a dress suit and a tie, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got the same person with the same message, but now he's taken himself out of himself and said, okay, how does that person need to see me to be able to hear me? What is it they need from me? And I think that is a big, big challenge we have, because we're not taught this. We're not taught how to communicate at a school level. We assumed to be able to communicate because we can make a noise. But that's something that I think is severely lacking from our education system, real communication. Right. And it goes as far as, get out of yourself and say to yourself, how does this person need to hear the message I have to deliver? Not say that I've got this message, they should be able to understand it.
Right. Right. And it's the same thing, even as we talk about, I have conversations with people all the time, because there are people out there that are teaching people that absolutely everyone on the planet should have a podcast. And I disagree, like that everyone who's an entrepreneur should have a podcast. I disagree, because that's not necessarily where your audience is. That's not necessarily fun fact, I don't like podcasts. I don't like it. That's why I do a video show. But that's something that I learned early on. I wish someone had said to me back when I was trying to do podcasts, this isn't where your audience is, Jessica, or it might not be where it is. I wish someone had said that to me, because you have to meet people where they are if you want them to hear you. And so I love that so much, what you're saying. And that
goes back to your strengths, doesn't it? What is it you're good at? Because you could have a voice which will put the wall to sleep. And if you've got a podcast, it's not going to serve you if you're that person.
That's it. I'm going back to what Brittany said earlier as well, because I don't think you need a podcast, Stuart. She said you speak and I'm just peace and calmness instantly. Stress. Brittany's probably sleeping right now. Brittany, are you okay? Let us know.
Well, maybe she's in a state of bliss, and it's wonderful that my voice can do that for her. So I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to touch on really quickly before we run out of time. I know that we've been talking about kind of that fire, that passion for your business. There are we know that just like Brittany's nodding off, she said, just like, life can be, our businesses can kind of take us on a little bit of a roller coaster ride.
Of course,
And
yeah.
in those down moments where we're not really feeling the fire, it doesn't mean anything's really wrong, but it might be hard to get going in that moment. It might be hard to continue on. We might be questioning ourselves. Is there a way that you suggest people is there an activity or something that they can say to themselves to kind of reignite that fire that maybe is at a lull in the moment?
Yeah, well, the first thing is obviously we need that support network. That's one of the key functions of a support network, someone we can actually bounce off our feelings on. But if we don't have that person there and then, it might take some practice, but a good way is to go back in your life to the moments you've had that success, you've had that passion, and just relive them. And it could be something in childhood. It could be the fact that just recognizing that you learned so many things, and you really, really accepting it with gratitude, not saying, okay, everybody else can do that. And if we think of children, most children decide at around 10 or 11 months old that they can walk. So they do. They just get up and they do it. And then we dismiss it as a small thing that everybody can do. But it is actually a major, major milestone in our life. And if we can do these things, I mean, I've suggested to many people, get a success diary. Just get a physically hard book that's small enough to put in your pocket, but it's big enough and chunky enough to remind you of it. And write on it something like My Success Diary. And just write down all your successes. Did you get up at 6 o'clock this morning, or the time you set there? That's a success. Write it down and then do a little celebration. And then if you have that moment, you can get that book out and you can just open it and you just see success, 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 success. Look how successful I am. Things are not going so well at the moment, but that's a growth moment and everything else. And the thing is, don't limit it to one book. Have more. Have a whole bookshelf full of them. And then you'll see you are successful. And this is just a momentary lull. And we all go through it, just like the sea. You get a wave, there's a trough. They work together in harmony. But, generally everything, gets better and better and better. And that is a very, very powerful tool that most people don't even think about, because we focus on the negativity. I mean, if I say to you, how many things are you good at? You'll probably say, oh, okay, 10, 15, maybe 20, maybe 25 if you're really good. But if I say, how many things are are bad about you? It doesn't stop.
Right.
We're strange beasts, human beings. We focus on the negatives. We don't focus on the good, because we're taught not to boast and to be proud. But there's a difference between recognizing and boasting.
Yeah. It's so good, because the negativity that we have for ourselves, the way we speak to ourselves sometimes, but even me, that I really pride myself on, especially in the last few years, speaking to myself in a different way, because I believe that when you say something, you're breathing life into it. And I don't like that. I don't like that idea. And so, but I, if someone were to do exactly what you just talked about and said those two things, name what you're good at, I could probably think of like 10 things. And then if you would say the other thing, tell me what you're not good at, it would never end. I promise you. And so that tells me what you just shared, that I still have work to do as far as that.
We all have 24 hours a day, because we have to make it a conscious decision.
Right.
Okay, accept the things which are not so good, but we can always change them if we accept them and don't judge. And, you're going on about being conscious of how you speak to yourself. Everybody has this challenge.
Right.
And what often happens, though, is that they suddenly recognize that they spoke to themselves in a less than positive way. And then there's a judgment that kicks in.
Right. Yes.
But then if you just accept it, okay, I did that. That's wonderful. I'm so glad I did that. because it gives me the chance to grow. So it's that gratitude judgment that you know, is a beautiful cycle. Kick the judgment out, accept it, be aware of it, accept it, and then, you know, be grateful for that opportunity to grow. And, you know, it's like, I can and can I? I often go straight into the default mode of can I, and I stop myself. No, I didn't mean that. I'm not judging myself there. In the past, I may have been. You know, you said the wrong thing, you're a fool or whatever. But I just say, okay, no, I meant to say, I should say this because it's more powerful. And that's an unconscious reminder to myself of the power of the messages we give ourselves. But it's only allowed to happen because I haven't gone into the judgment mode. I've gone more into the gratitude mode. So those are things that are very simple in concept, but we need to continuously practice. And once we do, we'll catch ourselves, and you'll have a conversation. You say, oh, no, I said it again. That's great. And you just smile to yourself, and the person says, why are you smiling? You say, no, I just heard what I said. And then, you know, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have lots of homework leading this episode tonight, boys and girls.
But, you know, let's not make it homework. You know, someone said to me, you know, let's make it home fun.
I love that.
Let's bring that fun factor back into it instead of the work factor, because work, you know, and homework is often a negative reminder of our school days, and we don't like that. So let's make it home fun, because it is fun. You're laughing now. I'm laughing now. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I also loved the suggestion you made about going back and like, if you're struggling to find that passion, find that fire, find the joy in the moment in what you're doing, to go back to a time when you felt it, because that is just what we've been doing this week on Project Joy Live. We have been having totally 80s week on the show and just having lots of fun with it. And it's brought me so much joy just to have that bit of nostalgia, to think back to my childhood, a time that was a little bit simpler, when I didn't have to worry about bills and children and, you know, world events and politics and things like that.
And it tells you can enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, nostalgia can be a loaded word. So, you know, it can be, you know, sadness and everything else. But just go back to that time of fun, that time of freedom.
I love
when,
that.
You know, you were able to, you know, it may be the time you played football or, you know, baseball or whatever sport it is, and you scored a goal, and it wasn't even anything special, but it was the first time, and it made you feel so good.
Right.
And then you just celebrate it, and you just focus on that beautiful energy, that release, that happiness, and then it changes where you are in this moment.
Absolutely. Well, Stuart, I have put your email address down on the bottom there so that people are able to connect with you. Is there anywhere else you would like for them to find you if they would like
LinkedIn,
to connect?
You know, the best place, because unfortunately, well, I don't say unfortunately because I don't like Facebook particularly, but you know, Facebook is banned here, so LinkedIn is the best thing. And my name is Stuart Elliott, as you've got on the bottom, but with a number 1 after it. That's how you find me, because somebody else took my name.
Don't you hate? Listen, I was on. I couldn't get the Breakthrough Show Network on Twitter, and you know what kills me about this is that when you go to find your name on something, and it's not even an active account, like they don't do anything with it. It's hello, I will do something with it.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is, for me anyway, it was interesting. I found, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, a British band called Cockney Rebel.
That sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you a song.
But yeah, because it was more a British band. But the drummer from that is also called Stuart Elliott, and he's one of the people who's got the name. And there's also a football star who's called Stuart Elliott who's got that name. So, you know, maybe I'm walking in the shoes of greatness, so it's okay.
Fun facts here today. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really had a lot of fun. It's always a great conversation with you. And is there anything you would like to leave our audience with tonight?
I would just like to go back to that you know, awareness, accept without judgment, and be grateful for the opportunity to grow. And that gives you the power to make those conscious choices. It's such a basic thing, but it's not something we're taught at a young level. And I think I've mentioned it to you before, that we should be taught this at school. It's something that we need to take on board. And, you know, the fact is that if something is not going right and you become aware of it, don't castigate yourself, don't criticize, just be grateful. that you've noticed, and now you can grow from it. And
Right.
that's really powerful, really. Every day, every moment, you work with that sort of thinking. You can change your life in so many ways.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Stuart. I
It's my
appreciate all your
pleasure.
stories and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give you guys a couple quick announcements. So our Totally 80s episode tomorrow is going to be postponed until Thursday because my daughter's surgery was rescheduled, and fun times being a parent. That's the beauty of it, though. As entrepreneurs, we get to move things around and do things our way. So that will be coming up on Thursday. But tomorrow you can tune in and watch Declutter for Change live with Heather Clark at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. She's going to be talking about the power of creating separate spaces. And I know she applies it to families, and it's always a fun time when we talk about those separate spaces with children and all of that. Do you guys have that experience, Stuart, with your kids as well? Like, this is my space, this is yours.
They try to create it as well. They do it naturally. That sometimes they come home from kindergarten and they just go off and they shut the lounge door and Dad is not allowed in. They've decided this is their space for the evening. But going one step further to what we spoke about at the beginning, we need to do that with our relationships, with our friends, with our family, and find spaces. Okay, this friend is good for this part of my life, this moment, or this energy, and this friend is good for this energy, and apply it in so many different ways. It's a very, very powerful philosophy, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you again, Stuart. I want to thank everybody else who's watching or listening wherever you are in the world tonight. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to remind you, whether it comes to your business or your life, to do things your way. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Stuart.
Bye now. Bye, everybody.